Alright, so I am going to open up our fish project. Alright, this is where we left off last time. Okay, so we have the starfish. Starfish. We have the star of our show that we can adjust and edit and play around with and dot dot dot. But now what we want to do is we want to add in a little bit something else. You know, something that's going to really make this thing be a little bit more realistic looking, and that's adding like a little school of fish that's kind of swimming around him as well. Not around him, but near him. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to save the scene as. We're going to call it fish underscore setup school. Okay, so that's a school setup. So I'm going to go through the outliner, and essentially I'm just going to delete the curve and my lattice, and that takes my fish back to just his default pose. Okay, and I can also delete this extra camera. I don't really need the extra camera in there. So now I have the fish, and I have all of his controls here. So I'm going to grab the fish and just reset him back to his zero spot. There he is. And if I hit play, all of his animation that we had set up before still works. Okay. Now this is important because what I need to do is I need to find the pattern. I need to find where it loops, and we're going to create a loop of this one fish. So just for fun, I'll set this to 30. And I'll see if it looks like a loop. Okay, it looks like there's a little bit of a hiccup right here in this fin, and these fins here. So let's set this to, sometimes you guys set it to 29. Nope, it's still there. Okay, and most likely it's because of our expressions. So I'm going to go into my expression editor. Okay, and so what these are doing, if you remember, this is taking the sine of frame divided by 8. This one's taking the sine of frame divided by -8. This one's taking the sine of frame divided by 5. This one's doing time. These three up here are doing time. Okay, so let's look at the factors that are going into this. I'm going to pull up WordPad. Okay, so our frame rate, just so we have it here, is 30. That's what we want it to be. So our time is equal to 30 frames per second. Okay, and our frames are our frames. All right, so when we do something like time, that's just going to be whatever time we're at. Okay, so stuff like the dorsal fin, the anal fin, and the pectoral fin, having these guys set to time, it should create a loop at the 30 frame per second. So this is the dorsal fin. Go into the front view. Okay, and if we look at this, we can see where it's at, and we look at that, we can see where it's at. It's obviously not anywhere near where we want it to be. So let me just increase it a bit. I just want to see when it's going to get back to that spot. So it's waving there. And that's what I expected. 60 is about where it's at. Okay, because it's doing basically half the time. So now as I hit play, you can see that that's looping perfectly. Let's go to the top view again. Come on, where are you at? Okay, now these little fins on the side here, which are the left and right fin, let me open the expression editor again. The left and right fin are taking the frame and dividing it by 8. Okay, so 60 is our loop for time. So if we took 60, that's the frame we're at, we divide it by 8, we're going to get, I'll do this in the calculator just so you can see it, 7.5. Okay, so it gives us basically a random value when we get there. Okay, we want to kind of hit this right on the spot of where that's going to be at. All right, so we want this at whatever it is at 1, and we can look at the value here. If I click on this and I see that's negative 2.493, when I get to 60, I want it to be pretty close to that, but obviously we're nowhere near that value. Okay, and we're probably going to be closer to it. Come on. Negative 2.493. Right about here. Right about there. Between 51 and 52, we're close to it, but we're not right on. Okay? And here, if you look, this is going in first. See that both the fins are going in right at the beginning. So I want to make sure at the end here that they're still going in. It looks like they're still going in, it's just not hitting it right at that spot. So what I can do is I can just say, instead of dividing this by 8, let's divide it by 10. So divide both of these by 10 and negative 10. And that gets us to 5. This gets us to negative 1. Alright, so now we'll see if we get that looping. It's not going to be exact. We want it to be a bit closer. So we can just do some experimenting here. If I take it to 11, what I'm trying to do is get a seamless movement. That seems to have made it worse. So let's try 9. So 9 and negative 9. We want it to look like from the start of this to the end of this that there's no jump. And here there's definitely a jump because we're at negative 7, and then we're jumping back to that. So maybe negative 9.5, or positive 9.5 and negative 9.5. There we go. I think we hit it right there. And if we look, this is 0.652, and the beginning is negative 2. Okay? So that's a pretty good looping right there. So we don't have to worry too much about what these actual numbers are, but just be aware that, you know, we were trying to get these to be as seamless as possible as far as going from one side to the other. So we fixed the dorsal fin, we fixed that. Let's check out the tail. Okay, the tail is pretty good. There's a tiny little movement there, but I don't think it's going to be anything crazy. You can check out these little guys in the bottom here. Those should be fine. There's a bit of a movement right there. And that would be the pectoral fins. So I'm going to divide the time, or multiply the time, times 1.1. 1.2. There we go. You see, it looks like there's no discerning movement there from start to end. We don't see that there's a glitch. And our goal is to make sure that this entire fish, we could sit here and play this 60 frame loop, and we would never see this thing jump. I think this back fin is probably going to be good also. Yep, the back fin is good also. Okay? So we play with these expressions until we get this thing to look nice and smooth. And right now it looks nice and smooth. So we're good. So now what we can do is we can do our next part, which is duplicating this. So we have 60 frames here. 60 frames is actually a lot to bring in. If I were to go through and play this by every second frame, okay, that would still be a lot, but it would definitely be a little bit more manageable. Okay, so I'm going to go to here real quick. creative crash, duplicate on time. So there's a duplicate animation array. And essentially what we need to do is we need to go to every single frame, click the fish, duplicate it, click the fish again, go to the next frame, duplicate it, click the fish, go to the next frame, duplicate it. So here is a script that is available if you don't want to do it manually. The script will duplicate an object or hierarchy and offset the animation in time. Okay, so just for fun, we'll try this out. So I'm going to log in. Then I'm going to download the script. And I'm just going to say open with WordPad. Okay, so here's how to install the script if we need to. Here's how to source it. I'm just going to hit Control-A and copy the entire thing. Then I'm going to go into Maya, open up the script editor down here, and paste this in there. Okay, and then hit Control-Enter. Now what that does is it loads the script in there. And then somewhere at the top of this, you can see this is a crazy long script. Select the object you want to, one object or hierarchy, type G, duplicate when in Maya. Okay, so now if I were to just copy this, and I have the fish selected, I'm going to paste and run the script. So it's going to say how many copies do you want. And I've never used this script before, but I just want you to see that sometimes you can do things a lot simpler. I'm going to say copy, how many copies do we want? 60, time offset 1, apply and close. So it appears there's a controller in here. And the controller is not doing what I thought this would do. Everything appears to be locked using expressions. They have their own expressions written on this thing. And it's definitely moved them and duplicated them, but you see all the animations are exactly the same. It's not what I wanted in this. Alright, so let me just undo that script. There we go. So I'm back to normal. Just for fun, let me run this again and just to see if maybe I typed something wrong here. So just for fun, we'll just leave it at the defaults. Yeah, it's exactly the same still. Alright, let's just undoing that. There we go. Alright. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to write my own script and I'll be back. Alright, so here's my script that I wrote. Essentially what this is doing is it's grabbing all the objects in the scene. It's making a number of how many objects do we have selected, printing that number. That doesn't do anything for us really. And then what it's doing, I can get rid of this hello, do that. And then what it's doing here is that it's going through the object that I have selected, and then it's going to go to the current frame, duplicate it, go to the next frame, duplicate it, go to the next frame, duplicate it, go to the next frame, duplicate it, all the way up to 100 here. So I'm going to set the 100 to how many frames I have, which is 60. Okay, and I'm going to copy this. And I'm just going to click on the fish group, open up the expression editor here, paste it in here, and then hit Control Enter. Okay, the mouse is going to flicker a little bit. I'm going to close this, and now what you see is that we have 60 copies of this fish. Okay, now like I said before, I don't need 60 copies of this fish. So what I'm going to do is, here's my original. I'm just going to put him on a layer. So that's the original guy. Just hide him. Okay. All these other ones, they have the stuff connected to them. Like if I were to move this out, they have this circle here, and they have these things here, but none of these are going to work for it, or at least they shouldn't work. Yeah, they don't work. Okay. So I can delete all that, and that'll save me a little bit of real estate in my screen. So I'm just going to marquee here and delete that shape. I'm going to turn off surface selection up here and marquee it and delete all that shape. Okay, so now it's a little bit cleaner. Alright, so now we just have the fish and the eyes. So what I'm going to do is go to each one of these, not the original one, each one of these guys, and just say mesh combine. Okay, and I have to do them one at a time, otherwise it will try to combine all of them together, and I don't want that. I want them to be individual. Now, could I write a script for doing this? Sure, I could write a script for doing this. I could even have included it in the other script that I already wrote. Okay, now I'm going to grab them all and delete their history. That'll get rid of all these fish here, or it should. Alright, I'll shift click those too. And delete the history. No, they're just empty now because they were a group. Okay, so now I can delete them. There we go. Okay, so now I have all these fish. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab every other one. There we go. So now I have every other fish. And I'm just going to go to File, save my scene real quick, and then go to File, Export Selection. I'm going to call this Exported Fish, and I'm just going to save it out as a Maya binary file. That way I can go into my exported fish, and that's all I'm dealing with is my exported fish. No other fish are in here. Okay, so I'm going to grab the first one, I'm going to shift click the last one, and I need to rename these just for my own sanity's sake. So I'm going to come up here to where this little bullseye is, and I'm going to say rename. Okay, I've clicked on the top one, shift clicked the bottom one, and I'm going to rename this to fish 1. Enter. So now what it does, it renames fish 1, fish 2, fish 3, all the way down to the bottom of fish 30. Okay? So what we have is a static stack of images, kind of like a freeze frame of the fish's animation. Okay? So now that we have that, I'm going to change my mode up here to N Dynamics. And under N Dynamics, I'm going to go under N Particle and say create N Particle points. I'm actually going to change these to balls, but you keep them as points. Okay, and the reason I'm doing that is just so you can see what's happening. So I'm going to use an emitter, so create N Particles, create emitter. I'm going to use a volume emitter, cube, create. Okay, so now I have, if I scale this up, this cube. And what's going to happen is all those fish are going to come out of that cube. So I'm going to have this kind of off screen, like that. And right now these arrows are going in all the directions. I only want them to go in one direction, just like the band. So I'm going to change my volume away from center and away from axis off. And all along axis I'm going to turn on. Okay, my along axis is going up, so I'm just going to rotate and scale. There we go. And now if I rewind this, give myself some more frames, and then make sure that my preferences are set to play every frame, which they are, and then I hit play, what we're going to see is a bunch of tiny dots. Let me rewind this again. What we should be seeing is a bunch of tiny dots. There they are. They're so tiny we can't even see them. So I'm just going to go and grab my attribute editor, go to the particle size, and I'm just going to crank this up just so it's easier to see. Okay, we'll change those later. Alright, so here's all those dots, and those dots will represent fish. We're going to replace these dots with these fish. So I'm going to take this emitter, and I'm going to say along axis, let's make it 30. Let's take this and make it 60. Let's take it, make it 300. There we go. Okay. So this is how fast they're going to be coming out. 800. There we go. Okay. Now, eventually, if I just let this play and play and play, you'll see that they're kind of stopping about here, and it looks like they might even be falling a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to hit Control A, go to the nucleus, and I'm going to turn gravity off. We don't need gravity in this case. Air density, I'm also going to turn that off. So now rewind, we'll play. Now what we should see is these things just continuously going, and that's what we wanted. Okay, so imagine that each one of these dots is a fish wagging its little fishy tail. Okay, that's what we're doing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the outliner. Come on. There we go. Grab fish 1, shift click fish 30. I'm going to go to N particles, there they are, instancer replacement. And what this is going to do is it's going to replace those dots with these fish. And I'm going to say cycle sequential. So what it's going to do is go to fish 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then all the way down to 30, and then jump back up to the top. So then we'll hit create. We'll wait. And now I have a sphere, or a blob, pierced into the middle of my fish. So I'm going to grab my particles just by marqueing one of them, change my radius back down to nothing, and now if I hit 6, you can see all my fish are textured. And if I rewind this and hit play, it might be a little tricky to see, but they are all there, and they are all wagging their tails and flapping their fins and doing all the stuff that fish typically do. Okay? Whoa, too much. Alright, and I could even go in here and maybe make less fish. This will go a little bit quicker if I make less fish, and I'll come down to my long axis and make it 500, just so it's a little bit slower. And it's just tricky to get, the right speed. There you go. You can see him wagging his tail. Alright, now it's pretty boring having them all go perfectly straight. So I'm going to add in a little bit of random direction here. So I'm just going to take the random direction of 20. Okay. Now see, like this guy here, he's going up at an angle, but he's still facing straight, and that looks kind of weird. So I'm going to go into the particles. I'm going to just marquee one of my fish. Go down to where it says instancer. Go down to where it says aim direction, and I'm going to change this to velocity. Okay. Now what happens is the fish are now aiming the direction that they're what Maya thinks is the front. Okay. So if I go and grab my original fish group, fish 1 to fish 30, here's my original fish group. What Maya thinks is the front is anything going in the positive x direction. So it actually believes that this is the front. So what I'm going to do is just rotate this 90 degrees. There we go. Freeze my transforms. Actually, let me scale him down too. I think he's probably a bit big. There we go. Freeze my transforms. And now if we shrink this box so that it's appropriate size, and we hit play. Oops, let's scale it down some more. And then because I scaled it down, let me scale my velocity down. So I'm changing my long axis. Whoa. It's a fish run. And we'll change our random direction speed as well. There we go. That's much better. So now we've created this little just aquarium type thing of all of these fish, swimming around. Just went inside one. Okay. And if we see that some are colliding with each other, we can hit Control A. We can go to the end particle shape, and under collisions, I can say solver display self collision. Okay, and if I go, I can't see it because it's so tiny. But I'm going to take my self collide with scale up. Maybe I'll wind it and play it again. Yeah, these two are pretty close. Let me take my radius. There we go. So I didn't have a radius, it was freaking out. 0.05. There we go. So let's take our self collide with. And I'm making it just as big as the fish. Okay, so now when I rewind this and play it, what should happen is none of these collisions should collide with each other. So that when I turn this back to off, none of my fish are going to collide with each other because they have this invisible sphere around them that makes it impossible to collide. And if I want more fish, I can just come up to my rate and put in 100. Now you'll see that they just kind of pop into view. Okay, we don't want them just popping into view. So what we would do is we would just have this kind of pre-roll a little bit, and then we could have this cluster. And you can see the higher the rate, the more pieces of geometry that are in my scene. I'm right up to 2 million polygons or so on this. Okay, so you just have to be careful. I think 10 was probably a good value so that we can still see that there's, other things going on. Alright, so now I'm going to save this. And I'm going to go to my other scene, open. FishRigging. There he is. Now I know I need to scale him down, so I can just grab this curve, scale the curve down, grab my fish, scale the fish down. And hopefully nothing bad happened. Okay, it looks like something funky did happen here. Alright, so I'm just going to go through and delete the lattice. Scale the fish down again, just so he's about the same size. And let me actually import my exported fish out. There we go. So now they're about the same size. He might be, you know, a bit bigger. Maybe he's the boss of the group. If he's a star of the show, we definitely want him to be bigger anyway, so that he stands out. And let me take this and pull it over here. Okay, and then I'm just going to grab him and just put that lattice on him again. Animate, yes, that's right. Motion paths, flow path object. I'm going to do it to the object itself. And I'll do this to 10, maybe 6, 6, and 6. Oops, let me rewind him back to the beginning and then do that. I like to do it at the beginning so it's nice and even. There we go. And then remember, I can go in the outliner and grab the lattice and the base and just kind of scale these down to fit the fish better. There we go. And then of course I can hide the lattice so we don't see it. There we go. So now he's deforming like he should. Everything's moving along with him. So we're good. Now then I'm just going to reset those two. It looked like it was sliding off a little bit here. Just zoom in, you can see that these pieces are no longer like on him, which they should be. And that could have happened just because I was scaling up these boxes. So I'm just going to not scale up the boxes and just look at it here and see, yeah, it's definitely not moving away. Alright, so no, they are moving away. Alright, well, it doesn't affect the animation, it's just odd that it's doing it. Alright. And realistically, it doesn't matter because these guys are just being pushed out, but all that animation is happening other spots. So let me just check it again just to make sure he's still nice and moving. Yeah, he still has a bend to him, so everything's good there. Alright. Alright, so now what we need to do is his animation is going to start, you know, after this point. So after frame like 24, so that's when his animation is going to kick on. So I want to have fish already like populating this area and he's just kind of swimming through the fish. So I'm going to make this fish area a bit bigger. Like that. And then I'm going to hit play. And I'm just going to let this thing kind of load up with fish. Okay? Even if I have to add like 1,000 frames, I'll add 1,000 frames and let there be 1,000 fish. Or however many. Alright, let's say that's good there. Okay? Because he's starting right here. So we should be able to have plenty of fish right there when he's starting. Alright? So I'm going to grab my fish, my particle fish. I'm going to go to N solvers, initial state, set from current. So what that does is when I rewind this, they start right there. And then what I'm going to do is grab my emitter and just turn it off. Okay, that way my rate is 0 on here. So I'm using basically the fish that are inside this. Okay, and I just want to make sure also that he doesn't collide with any of the fish. All right, and it looks like he follows them pretty good. I should have plenty of space to kind of come up here and do a couple camera shots to kind of show off his movement. So I like the way that this is progressing. And if I hit play, you'll see that he is going to be pretty lonely once he gets to the top here, but it'll work out. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to grab my fish, my particle fish, go to Encache, create Encache. And this is just going to be particle fish swimming. I'm going to say 1 file per frame, time slider, and hit create. And what this is going to do is going to go through and write out the particle data for all of these fish. So before I couldn't click and drag inside my timeline, it would freak out. So what I would have to do is rewind it and play it. Well, this is going to save their animation as actual, not keyframe animation, but something that's going to be read off of the hard drive, so that we could click and drag and scrub and do whatever we need to. Because right now it's pretty much dynamic, okay? So that as we hit play, we'll get a whole bunch of random things happening inside there. Well, other way we wouldn't. This way we're not going to get anything dynamic. It's going to be locked in dynamics. So it's almost done. You see that it's just chugging along here. And once I get to 440, it will be finished, and then we can move on to the next step. And the next thing I want to do is I want to see if I can duplicate this whole fish setup and create another fish on a path. There we go. So now we're done. So now if I click and drag in here, you can see how I get this whole movement. Okay. Now I could do the same exact thing. If I had another model of a fish, I could have another fish particle thing coming out of here, or a brand new one, or whatever, and have another clustering of fish. I could have, krill, or I don't know what, I think this is a bass. I could have perch, I could have sharks, I could have whatever. Okay. Oh, also we have these fish here. Those are our original fish. We want to hide those. So I'm going to put them on a layer and turn them off. Okay. This layer 2 will be fish copies. And then this other layer here is deformers. Alright. So now let's save our scene. There we go. Okay. So now let's see if we can duplicate this other one. So I'm just going to rewind. And the goal of this is that we grab the things that are important. The fish and the curve. Those are the two most important things. Everything else is just kind of connected to it. Okay. So now I can go to, I have the two things selected, edit, duplicate special option box. And by default, it's set to this. Okay. I want to click duplicate input graph, and then hit duplicate special. And then what I hopefully should get, if I did this correctly, is I get a new fish, a new curve, and I get a new lattice. Okay, so I'm going to take my curve and I'm going to adjust it. So I'm just going to pull it up just so I can test it, just to make sure it works. We'll notice that my animation for this second curve stops right here. Okay, if I hit play, or it's seemingly stopping right there. I don't know why the 300 is here, but it just continues going. So it just could be a display issue. All right, so you see that my new fish is following the curve. He's wagging his tail. His fins are still moving. He's rotating around. Everything that we did to the first fish has been applied to our new fish. Okay, and I can even go through his camera, which is fish 1 perspective 1, and then hit the play button. Just make sure his expressions are working. Alright, expressions are not working. Okay, I expected this. Expression editor. So here's expression 1. Sine dorsal dot offset equals time. Fish control dot dorsal fin. Okay. Expression 2 is let's go to the bend because that's where I'm on. Bend tail 1 dot curvature, which is that, equals the sine of frame divided by 5 times 20. Alright, so what I did in order to get these expressions to start working again, okay, you can see that they are indeed working, is I went through and I renamed my fish. So I just clicked on the fish group, renamed him second fish. Clicked on the controller and renamed the controller. Sometimes it just gets confused, and sometimes it's literally just a matter of closing the scene and reopening it. Okay? So now that I have this as a second curve, then I can just modify these points and reshape how this guy is kind of moving around. Okay, I don't want it to be drastically different, but I do want to have, you know, some sort of difference in here to kind of show off the ability to control these separate fish. Okay, so something like that, let's say. There we go. All right, so now we rewind. And again, we're just going to skip that first part. Okay, and I still want to go through and just kind of keep an eye on my starfish and just make sure they don't collide with any of the other ones. Okay, because Maya just won't detect that. And obviously it would look funny. Okay, so everything looks good here. I don't see any collisions happening. And I could always scale up one of these guys too if I needed to, just to make, you know, one a little bit more dominant than the other. I could also add different textures too if I wanted to go into that level of depth in this, and for this I don't want to, but obviously I could if I wanted to. Alright, so I'm going to start at frame 30, so I'm just going to set this to 30. And I'm going to create a couple cameras. So new camera here, I'll call this one fish angle 1 underscore render. Okay, so this looks like a nice view of the fish. I want to get kind of close to one of them. Maybe our starfish. Where's he going? Right here. There we go. That looks nice. Let me click the blue circle. Make sure we're kind of lined up. We are. That's good. So now I can go to my camera, make sure it's selected. I just want to set a couple keyframes. I never like to have a static camera, so I set a keyframe here with S. Maybe I'll even make this a bit wider view. There we go. Hit S to set a key. I'll go up to, let's say, 160 and just kind of pull back a little bit. And set another key. That might be too much. Let's see. Okay, my camera is definitely doing some easing in, easing out. So let me go to the graph editor also. I just want to make these linear. There we go. I like that angle. Fish swims right by. Cool. Okay, so now let's make a new camera. And we'll call this one fish angle. Render cam 2. This one I'm going to go with a tighter focal length. No, I'm not. I don't like the way it looks. There we go. This gives it obviously a lot more depth, but I'm going to do something more head-on with it. There we go. So something like that is good. So let's go. The other one was to 160. It really doesn't matter how far we go. I could do a bunch of shots with this, you know, from here, from 60 to 200, just of different angles and get what I need. Ooh, I like that. This one's right by. Okay. So I'm just finding a good spot and then getting some good action. So let's set a key here. Let's go up to 240. And I'll pull back a little bit. Let's just see what this gives us. Looks nice. Okay, again, let's go to the graph editor and just make sure that we don't have any flattening going on. Yeah, it's all linear. Okay, so now let's go to, maybe we'll add one more camera. And this one will just show the back of the fish. Okay, you can see I went a little bit too far on this focal length. But it does give it a nice look. So yeah, let's render one out with this really stretched out focal length. Maybe even a little bit less stretchy. There we go. So I'm going to set a key, let's say here. I'm going to go up a little bit. I'm just going to follow this guy. Oops. Which way did he go? There he is. And I'm following the wrong fish. Let's see, there he is. And I'll switch to the other side so I'm kind of between these two fish. So I don't want that. Let's go to the graph editor. I'm just going to delete this middle key. Make these linear. Okay, I'm still going through him. So what I'm going to need to do is maybe go here and go above him. There we go. Now he kind of comes around. And then what I can do is follow them in. There we go. So now let's go to the graph editor. These end ones here are linear. These middle ones are going to be spline. There you go. I like that camera angle. Okay, so I'm going to save this. And then rendering, same thing that we did last time. Make it look nice. Obviously, we may want to add in some scenery back here just as a fun little tidbit. So I can grab a plane. And make sure it's below the fish. There we go. I added a bunch of divisions on here so that I can go to my mesh sculpt geometry tool, and I'm going to going to turn my reflection off. There we go. I'm using a pull operation to pull up some of these pieces of geometry back here. So holding down B, left mouse button dragging, that's your brush size. Holding down M, left mouse button dragging, that'll be your maximum displacement. Holding down U and clicking and dragging, that will be your brush operation. So whether you're using pushing, pulling, or smoothing, or erasing, or whatever it is. Alright, so that gives me just kind of like an underwater ground. And a little bit of smoothing here. There we go. Alright, so it just makes it look a little bit more into a scene than just like nothing. And you can go crazy decorating this thing with, you know, different items. I think I'm going to scale it out a bit in the direction like that. And let me look through one of my cameras again. I think that's going to look nice having just that little bit of scenery there so we can see something. Yeah, look at that. That really adds a lot to it, just having that little bit in there. In perspective 2, I didn't rename this camera. Fish cam render 3. Yeah, that adds a whole lot to the scene. And if you wanted to make it even look better, fish. Yeah, think of what I'm trying to type. Underwater. You could find a really nice image of something like this that you could use as like a wraparound. Now it might be a little bit too clean. And that one's a little bit too static. You can also probably find a movie or something in there too. Okay, so you can use it as an environment to kind of wrap around a cylinder if you wanted to just add a little bit more, you know, realism to the scene. Okay, or you could also just color it. So I deleted the top and the bottom because I don't need those. I'm going to add in let's add a Lambert. I'm going to click on the color, go to ramp, and what I could also do is just pick some colors from here. Just pick on some of these blues. There you go, maybe something like that. And then I'll use my cylinder here and just do a cylindrical mapping. Okay, that way I get the full texture on there. I could also go and find a picture of sand. Just to get some idea of what it looks like. Just dotty gray. Okay. Now I can use a picture. I'm just going to grab this and add. I'm just going to do blends in this case. You could also do Mia's or any other thing. Granite. Oops. There we go. So sandy color. That's good. Let me just take my cell size down. And then let's save, do a little rendering, and just see what it looks like. Okay, so I mean, it's not obviously there yet. Underwater is very murky and cloudy, so like way back here, we would actually have very little lighting in there. If you look at any underwater pictures, you can see how the light just kind of like drops off really, really quick way in the distance. Okay, we also have this caustic-y pattern in here too, which I could grab from here. Let's grab that one. And what I'm going to do is skip out to this other camera. I'm going to create a spotlight. Okay, I'm just aiming the spotlight basically straight down to my scene. And then under the intensity here, I'm going to click on map and grab that file. Then I'm going to add a little bit more angle to this. I'm going to take my penumbra up, take my drop off up, make sure shadows are on, which they are. I'll take my light radius to 10, shadow raise to 30. Make sure I'm rendering in mental ray, which I have to go through my plugin manager and enable. Come on, let me jump back to one of my other cameras. Alright, so that's what my light's doing. It's obviously the caustic patterns are a lot bigger than I want them to be. So let me go and grab my spotlight again. And I'm just going to go to this arrow here and just repeat my caustic pattern, maybe 8 and 8 with mirroring on. That might be too tiny, and then I'll just kind of cut it in the middle. Actually, that's pretty good. Okay, so that looks pretty nice. Let me just take my coloring and feed it into the blue range. There we go. And then I can add other lights too, just to kind of fill in the scene. Just add another spotlight. And again, I'll just leave this one in that kind of blue realm. Make this one big and soft. There we go. So now we're kind of getting that underwater, fishy looking look to this. Fishy looking look to this. Let's go and add some. Oops, I'm not even rendering this mental ray. I turned it on and I never rendered through it. So obviously give us a little bit different look. There you go, and I can tell this is just the other light is blowing it out way too much. So I'm just going to down the other light. Let's do another little render sample. There we go. And I think I want to boost my first light. So obviously I can't slide this because I've connected something to it. So I have to go to the file, and under color balance I have to click on color gain and just give this a higher value here, and that'll push those values up. Alright, for some reason Mentoray didn't like me putting anything into my intensity on the light. So I right-clicked and broke the intensity. I just remapped it to color, and then I was able to get this. Now obviously I don't like the coloring here, so what I can do is scroll into my file, and under Effects, I can go under a color remap and say Insert. Now what this is going to do is it's going to remap. So here are my black values, and then up here are my white values. So now if we just save this and render it, we should get black and white. Well, plus the thing. So now I can play with this and just give this some coloring. And this is a perfectly acceptable way to do this as well. It's a matter of working around the limitations of your rendering package. There we go. So you see we're pretty much at that same spot. And actually we do have a little bit more control over this just because of how it's now set up. Alright, so now let's go back to our other light that I had in here. Spotlight 2. Let me pull this back up. And I'm going to focus in these spotlights. I think the cone angles might be a little bit too big. I'm going to take my cone angle down on that one. And spotlight 1, same kind of thing. There we go. That way it gives us a little bit more drop off before it hits that cylinder. And we could brighten the cylinder too, just to give it a different look. Now the ultimate thing would be as the fish are swimming, that this caustic pattern is also moving. There you go. See how we have the drop off back here? Something like that, something like this. You see there's something back there. That's actually a really good one here. Okay. And then maybe we'll have just another light. I'm just duplicating this one, just pulling this way down and spreading it out. Alright, I can already see I need to make it a little bit bigger. Let me take my drop off and penumbra down. Yeah, I'm not really satisfied with that. I'm going to leave that the way it is and just go to my cylinder, and I can just pull up the ambient color a touch. And what that's going to do is just fill in this area a bit more. All right, let's go crazy just so we can see it. There we go. Oops. So now I can pull it back down and just keep tweaking that until I get it again to what I'm after. I'm after that. Just a tiny bit of blue. You may not be able to see it in the video, but it's there. Tiny, tiny bit of blue. Okay, and then I'm just going to turn on Final Gather also. And then of course, you want to render this thing out with motion blur full because we have deformation. I'm just going to turn it off for this little preview that I'm doing. Let me play it until I get to a good angle here. Right there. And on my new version, I have the fish's eye all adjusted. Alright, so there will be a nice little rendering. And it looks beautiful. And there it is. Okay. So take that. I'm going to give you the script. You'll have the fish, obviously, because it'll all be rendered. And then just go from there.